I still don't like standing in crowds, even now. Give me an empty road and a quiet sky and I'm fine. But put me in a mass of people, shoulder to shoulder, everyone's phone up in the air and something in my chest tightens. It's been 3 years and it still does that. People ask me why, and I tell them about the boy, and the guard, and the 11 seconds that I'll carry with me until the day I die. Let me start from the beginning, though, because if you don't understand how ordinary that morning was, you won't understand how much it changed. It was late spring, one of those mornings that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. The sun would break through, warm your neck for a minute, and then a cloud would slide across and you'd feel the chill again. I remember because I'd taken my jacket off, tied it round my waist, and within 10 minutes I was untying it again. I was in the city on a work trip. Nothing glamorous. 2 days of meetings, a hotel that smelled faintly of old carpet, and a free morning I hadn't planned for. My flight home wasn't until the evening, so I did what every tourist does. I went to see the palace. The Kingsmere Palace, if you've never been, sits at the end of a long ceremonial avenue lined with plane trees. There's a great iron gate, gold at the tips, and behind it a courtyard of pale gravel that crunches when the guards march across it. That morning the forecourt was already packed. Coachloads of visitors, school groups in matching caps. A man selling little flags off a cart, and a woman beside him with a tray of postcards nobody was buying. And of course the guards. There were 2 of them at the gate that I could see. Tall, still. Red tunics, those enormous black bearskin hats, chin straps cutting a line across the jaw. You know the ones, everybody knows the ones. People stand right up close and pull faces at them, wave their hands, try to make them laugh. The guards never move. That's the whole point. That's the game the tourists come to lose. I wasn't interested in that. I found a spot near the railing, off to one side, where I could see the courtyard and not have anyone's selfie stick in my ear. I had a coffee in a paper cup going cold in my hand. I was, if I'm honest, a little bored. That's the thing about the worst days. They almost always start boring. The changing of the guard was due at 11. Word had gone round the crowd. You could feel the little ripple of anticipation, people checking watches, edging forward, parents lifting children onto their shoulders. A band would come through the arch, they said. Music, marching, the whole show. Near me, off to the left, there was a small roped-off area. I hadn't noticed it at first. It was a little raised section, a viewing spot, and it was guarded not by the bearskin men but by 2 others in dark suits, earpieces, the kind of men who look at the crowd and not at the palace. I remember thinking, someone important is coming. You learn to read those signs. When the men in suits arrive, so does somebody worth guarding. I was right. They came out about 20 minutes before 11, a small group, and in the middle of them, holding a woman's hand, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 7. Fair hair, cut neat, a little navy coat with brass buttons that caught the sun. He had that particular look children get when they're somewhere they've been told is important, but they don't quite know why, half solemn, half squirming. The woman beside him leaned down and said something in his ear, and he nodded, very serious, and then immediately went back to staring at the guards with his mouth slightly open. There was a murmur through the crowd. People had recognized him. Phones went up. And to be honest, I didn't know exactly who he was. I'm not one for following that world, but you could tell from the way people reacted that he was somebody. A young prince, someone near me whispered. Prince of the royal house, the little one. I remember he waved at one of the guards. Just a small wave, shy the way a kid waves. And the guard, of course, didn't wave back. Couldn't. The boy's face fell a little, and I found myself feeling oddly protective of him, this small person, surrounded by adults, wanting the one thing the man in the red coat wasn't allowed to give. His name, I'd learn later, was Edmund. But in that moment he was just a boy at a fence, like any boy, and I had no idea that in less than half an hour he would be the reason I'd never quite feel safe in a crowd again. The guard nearest to him, the one he'd waved at, I noticed him because he was young, younger than the others. There was something in the set of his shoulders that was different. The others stood like statues, eyes fixed on nothing. This one, his eyes moved, just barely, but they moved, along the crowd, back again, down the avenue, back to the boy, down the avenue. At the time I thought nothing of it. I thought he was just nervous. New to the job, maybe, trying not to get the drill wrong with a royal child 6 feet away. I know better now. The clock crept toward 11. The band could be heard warming up somewhere behind the arch, a few stray notes of brass drifting over the wall. The crowd thickened. I got jostled from behind and spilled a little cold coffee on my hand and swore under my breath. And that was when I first noticed the man. He was on the far side, near the railing, maybe 30 feet from where the boy stood in his little rope-toff pen. And the reason I noticed him was the coat. It was the wrong coat. Everyone else had shed their layers in the sun, jackets round waists, sleeves rolled. This man wore a heavy dark coat, buttoned to the throat, on a morning that had gone mild. He had a bag over his shoulder, one of those big shapeless holdalls, and he held the strap of it with both hands, up against his chest, the way you'd hold something you were afraid of dropping, or something you were afraid of someone taking. I looked at him for a second too long the way you do, and then I looked away, embarrassed at myself. It's a coat. He's cold. Some people run cold. I told myself all the things you tell yourself. Because the alternative, the thing your gut is quietly, insistently trying to say, is too big, too dramatic. Surely not here. Surely not now. Surely not. But my eye kept going back to him, and each time it did, my stomach felt a little lower. He wasn't watching the guards. That was the thing. Everyone else was watching the guards, or the arch where the band would come from, or their own children. This man was watching the boy, and he was moving, slowly, so slowly you'd never see it if you weren't looking. A shuffle here, a half step there, working his way along the railing. Toward the rope-toff pen, where the little prince stood on his tiptoes, trying to see over the gravel. I want to tell you I did something. I want to tell you I shouted or grabbed someone or ran. I didn't. I stood there with a cold coffee in my hand and a cold feeling in my gut, and I told myself over and over, don't be ridiculous. Because that's what most of us do most of the time. We wait for someone else to be sure. We wait for permission to be afraid. The young guard saw him too. I know he did because I was watching the guard almost as much as I was watching the man, and I saw the exact moment. The guard's eyes, which had been drifting the way they'd been drifting all morning, stopped, fixed, on the man in the coat, and stayed. You have to understand, these men are trained not to react. A pigeon could land on their hat and they wouldn't blink. Tourists scream in their faces and they don't flinch. So when I tell you that I saw something change in this young guard's face, understand that it was the smallest thing in the world. A tightening, a stillness inside the stillness, like a man holding his breath while already appearing not to breathe. His eyes went to the man, then to the boy, then back to the man. And then, and this is the part I've told 100 times and still can't fully explain, his hand moved. Not much, his right hand at his side, holding the rifle upright against his shoulder in the way they do. His fingers at the base of the weapon tapped, twice, against the wood, then a pause. Then twice more. I thought I imagined it. I truly did. I thought, you're seeing things now, you've worked yourself up, it's a coat and a nervous kid and a bored guard and you're building a film in your head. But across the courtyard, one of the other guards, one of the still ones, an older man, turned his head, just his head, a few degrees, toward the young one, and then his eyes, too, found the man in the coat. Something was being said, without a word, in a language I didn't speak but was suddenly, horribly certain was real. The band chose that moment to come through the arch. It hit like a wall, the drums first, that deep marching thud you feel in your chest before you hear it, then the brass, bright and enormous, echoing off the palace stone. The crowd roared, people clapped. Phones shot up. Children shrieked with delight. The whole forecourt turned as one toward the music and the marching column pouring through the archway in a river of red and black and gold. Everyone turned. Except 3 people. The young guard didn't turn, the older guard didn't turn, and the man in the coat didn't turn. While the entire courtyard faced the band, the man in the coat took his chance. In the noise and the chaos of everyone looking the other way, he moved, properly moved now, not a shuffle, a stride, toward the rope, toward the boy, one hand still clamped to the strap of that bag against his chest. And the boy, little Edmund, was looking up at the band with his mouth open, and his eyes wide, completely, utterly unaware. The woman holding his hand was looking at the band too. The men in dark suits with the earpieces, they were scanning, but they were scanning wide, watching the crowd as a whole, the way you do. And in that half-second of noise and color, the one thing that mattered was slipping through the gap between their eyes. I opened my mouth. I don't know what I was going to say. I don't know if a sound even came out. The music was so loud that it wouldn't have mattered. But the young guard was already moving. He broke his post, the one thing they are drilled hour after hour, month after month, never ever to do, and he came off that spot like something released from a spring. Not toward the band, not away from danger, toward it, toward the man, toward the boy. rifle coming down and across his body, boots hammering the gravel, and I swear even over the drums I heard the crunch of it, that hard, fast crunch of a man running full tilt across stone. The crowd nearest to him started to scatter. People don't know what's happening, but the body knows before the mind does. A man in uniform running flat out toward you is a signal older than language, and it went through the crowd like a shockwave, that first cold ripple of fear. The man in the coat's head snapped round. He saw the guard coming, and for one frozen instant, I will never forget this, the two of them locked eyes across 10 feet of gravel, and I saw the man's face, really saw it, and there was no confusion in it. No innocence. Whatever he had come to do, he had come to do it. His hand went into the bag. And the young guard, this boy in a red coat who by rights should have spent his whole career doing nothing more dangerous than standing still, closed the distance. I'll tell you what happened next. I'll tell you all of it. But I need you to sit with this part for a second first, because everyone remembers the ending. Everyone remembers how it turned out, and the ending is the reason it became a story people share. But that morning, in that instant, nobody knew the ending. Not the guard, not the man, not me. In that instant, it could have gone any way at all. The guard was running towards something that might have been the last thing he ever ran toward. He didn't know, he couldn't have known. He had a fraction of a second and a choice, and there was a child behind him, and he chose. That's the thing about the ones who do it. They don't get to know how it ends, they just go. The band played on. They hadn't seen. The drums thundered, and the brass soared, and the marching column kept coming through the arch, oblivious, magnificent, while 10 feet from a 7-year-old boy a man reached into a bag, and another man in a red coat threw himself across the last of the gravel to stop him. And the boy, Edmund, finally turned, pulled by some instinct, some change in the air. He turned away from the band and looked with those wide, solemn eyes straight at the two men closing on each other. And he didn't scream, he didn't move. He just froze. A small boy, alone for one endless second in the middle of a courtyard full of people, watching something come toward him that his mind was far too young to name. I'll tell you what the guard did. I'll tell you what was in the bag. I'll tell you about the 11 seconds and why I count them and why I still can't stand in a crowd. 11 seconds. I've done the math so many times I could recite it in my sleep. From the moment the young guard broke his post to the moment it was over, 11 seconds passed. Maybe 12. I've argued with myself about the last one for 3 years, but it wasn't more than that. It couldn't have been. The band hadn't even finished the phrase they were playing when it was done. 11 seconds. That's shorter than it takes to tie a shoe. Shorter than the time between a red light and the horn behind you. And into those 11 seconds a whole life got packed, the boys, the guards, the man's, and if I'm honest, a little piece of mine too. Let me slow it down for you, because that morning it happened fast, too fast, a blur of red and gray and gravel, but I've lived it in slow motion ever since. I can stretch those 11 seconds out until they last an hour. Let me stretch them for you now. The guard came off his post. I told you that already, but I don't think I told you how wrong it looked. That's the thing you have to understand about those men. Their stillness isn't laziness. It's the whole message. It says, nothing here needs to move. Everything is under control. The world can go about its business because we are watching and we will not so much as twitch. When one of them moves, really moves, not the slow ceremonial turn but a flat sprint, it's like watching a statue tear itself off its plinth. It breaks something in your brain. It tells you before any words can that the rules have changed. That something is very, very wrong. That's what rippled through the crowd. Not the man in the coat, most people never even saw him. It was the guard, a guard running. People turned toward it the way you turn toward a scream. He didn't shout. I want to be clear about that because people always ask. He didn't yell get down or bomb or anything you'd see in a film. There wasn't time, and I don't think it was in him to waste breath. He just ran. Rifle coming down across his chest. Bearskin hat, that ridiculous, beautiful, heavy hat, nearly coming off, tipping back, and him not caring, not reaching for it, just running. The man in the coat had maybe 8 feet on him, 8 feet to the rope. Behind the rope, the boy. And here's the part that still makes my hands go cold. The two other men, the ones in dark suits, the earpieces, the professionals whose entire job was that boy, they were good. I don't want you to think they were sleeping. They moved almost as fast as the guard. One of them had already started turning, already had a hand going inside his jacket, already had his mouth open to speak into whatever they speak into. They were half a second behind the guard. But half a second was the whole story. Because the man in the coat had planned it. He'd planned it around the band. He'd waited. I understood this only later, piecing it together. He'd waited for the one moment in the whole morning when 3,000 people and 2 trained protection officers would all, at exactly the same instant, look the other way. The band coming through the arch was the loudest, brightest, most attention-swallowing thing that was going to happen that day. And he'd stood there in his too-warm coat and let it come. And the moment it hit, he'd moved. It was a good plan. That's the thing nobody wants to say. It was a good plan, and it very nearly worked, and the only reason it didn't was that one young man in a red coat had spent the whole morning refusing to look at the band. I think about that a lot. Everyone else in that courtyard was doing exactly what they were supposed to do, watching the show, enjoying the day. Even the professionals were, for that one fatal half-second, pulled wide. And the one person who wasn't, the one person whose eyes had stayed narrow and low and on the wrong man the entire time, was the one nobody would have picked. The junior. The kid. The one whose job on paper was just to stand there and look nice for the photos. He reached the man at the rope. The man's hand was already in the bag. I saw it go in, that dark coat sleeve disappearing into the shapeless holdall up to the wrist. And I saw the guard reach him and not slow down, not stop, not try to talk, just hit him. His whole body. He drove his shoulder into the man's side, and both of them went down and away from the rope, away from the boy, sideways into the gravel, in a tangle of red cloth and dark coat, and the rifle clattering loose between them. The bag went too. It came off the man's shoulder as they fell, and it hit the gravel with a sound I felt in my teeth. A heavy, solid, unforgiving thud, not the sound of clothes or papers, the sound of something dense, something with weight to it. It skidded a couple of feet and stopped, and I remember, this is stupid, but I remember everyone near it flinching away from it at once, this whole ring of people leaning back from a canvas bag like it was a snake. Because now they'd seen, now the crowd knew. The half-second was over and the fear had arrived, and it went up like a fire catching. Someone screamed, then someone else. The scatter began, that ugly, panicked scramble where people don't run so much as fall over each other, where a pushchair gets knocked and a woman goes down and gets up again clutching a child, where 100 phones drop and nobody stops for them. I didn't run. I've thought about why. I think I was just frozen, same as the boy. My legs simply wouldn't take the instruction. I stood at the railing with my cold coffee still absurdly in my hand, and I watched. The 2 men were on the ground now, the guard on top, and the man was fighting. God, he was fighting, not like someone who's been caught doing something small. Like someone who has one thing left to do and is running out of time to do it. His free hand was clawing back toward the bag, reaching, straining across the gravel, fingers stretched, and the guard had him pinned but only barely, one knee across the man's chest and both hands locked on the arm that was reaching, hauling it back. And even from 30 feet I could see the strain of it, the shake in the guard's arms, the sheer animal effort of holding a man who did not want to be held. The bag was 3 feet away. The man's fingers were maybe 18 inches short of it. And the reaching, that's the image I can't put down. Not the running, not the tackle, the reaching. Because whatever was in that bag, the man wanted to get to it so badly that even flat on his back with a soldier's knee in his chest, he was still trying, still stretching, still reaching for it with everything he had left. That's when the professionals arrived. They came in fast and hard and silent, the way they're trained. One of them dropped onto the man's reaching arm and pinned it flat to the gravel. The other put a knee across his legs. And a third, where did the third come from? There had only been 2, but suddenly there was a third. The third scooped up the boy. I saw it. Little Edmund, still frozen, still staring, snatched up off his feet by a man in a dark suit, and turned bodily away from the whole scene. One big hand pressing the boy's face into his shoulder so the child couldn't see. The man already moving, already carrying him back and away, fast, through a gap that the other officers were somehow clearing with just their bodies and their eyes. And the woman, the one who'd been holding his hand, she was screaming his name. Just his name over and over, that pure animal sound a parent makes, and reaching after him, and someone had her by the arm and was moving her too, and she was fighting them, not understanding yet that they were saving her, only understanding that they were taking her boy, and it was the most terrible sound I heard that whole morning, worse than the crowd, worse than everything. A mother's voice breaking on one small name. They got the boy out. That's the thing to hold on to. Whatever happened next, they got the boy out. Within seconds, he was gone through a side gate into a car away safe. He never saw the worst of it. I've held on to that for 3 years. He was too young to understand, and they made sure he never had to. But there was still the bag. The man was pinned now, 3 officers, no chance, done. But the bag sat there in the gravel with its heavy, dense weight, and nobody had touched it, and everybody had seen it, and the whole courtyard, in the space of about 5 seconds, had turned from a panicked scramble into something worse. A stampede in slow motion. Because word of a bag travels differently than word of a fight. A fight people run from. A bag, a heavy bag, dropped, abandoned, near a royal child, that word carries a different kind of fear. An older fear. The fear that made all of us build our lives around the quiet dread of exactly this. And here is where the young guard did the thing. The thing I've never fully been able to explain to anyone. The thing that turned him from a soldier who did his job into the reason strangers still tell this story. He got up off the man. The professionals had the man. The man wasn't going anywhere. And the young guard, bleeding, I could see now, a cut over his eye where they'd gone down, his beautiful tunic filthy with gravel dust, his hat gone completely now, just his cropped hair and his young bloodied face. He got up, and he did not run. He went to the bag. Everyone else was going away from it. The whole world was leaning back, peeling away, and this one young man walked toward it. Slow, deliberate, he knelt down beside it, and he put himself between the bag and the crowd. I didn't understand at first. I thought, what are you doing? Get away from it. Are you mad? Get away. And then I understood, and understanding it was worse than not. He was covering it with his body. He'd put his own body between whatever was in that bag and the hundreds of people scrambling behind him. If it went off, if it was what everyone feared it was, the young guard had decided in that half a heartbeat that the thing between it and the crowd was going to be him. There's a word for that, and I don't like using it because it's been worn smooth by overuse. But there's no other word. He shielded them. He knelt over an abandoned bag that might have been the last thing he ever knelt over, and he spread himself across it, and he looked back over his shoulder at the crowd, and he finally spoke, and the only thing he said, the only words I heard him say the whole time were, "Back. Get back, move back." Not loud, he didn't scream it. He said it the way you'd say it to a child. Firm, calm, get back. And the people nearest him, God knows how, in all that noise and terror, the people nearest him heard it, and they moved, and it spread, this ring of people pushing back, away from the kneeling man and the thing he was covering. I've asked soldiers about this since, people who'd know. And they've told me things about protocols, about what you're supposed to do with a suspected device, about the fact that no, you are absolutely not supposed to lie on top of it. That's the opposite of everything they teach you, that it makes no tactical sense at all, that a body doesn't stop a blast, that the training says clear the area and wait for the people whose job it is. And I say, I know, I've heard all that. I understand the training says otherwise. But I was there, and I watched a 20-something-year-old kid with gravel in the cut over his eye and his mother's country's uniform torn at the shoulder decide in a fraction of a second that the crowd needed those extra seconds to get back more than he needed to follow the manual. And he gave them to himself. He made himself the thing in the way. You can tell me all day that it was the wrong call. Maybe it was. Maybe by every rule and every protocol it was the wrong call. I just know that if he'd made the right one, if he'd cleared off and waited, a lot of people who were standing too close would not have had the seconds they got to move. And I know which call I'd want the man kneeling in the gravel to make, if it were my child in that courtyard. He knelt there, alone, over the bag between it and all of us, and he waited. The seconds stretched. I could hear my own heart. That's not a figure of speech. In the middle of all that screaming and running, I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and slow and wrong, and I remember thinking very clearly, very calmly, I am about to watch that young man die. I want you to sit in that with me, because everyone knows how this ends. I'll tell you all of it, and it's not what my heart was telling me in that moment. But he didn't know how it ended either. He couldn't have. He was kneeling over a heavy bag that a fanatic had fought like a dying animal to reach, and he had made himself its blanket, and he did not know, could not know, whether the next second of his life would also be the last one of everyone's. And he stayed. That's the whole of it, really. That's the thing I came here to tell you. Not that he ran, not that he was fast. Lots of people are fast. But that when the running was done, when the boy was safe and the man was pinned and every instinct in the human body was screaming, "Get away, get away, get away," he did the opposite. He got closer. He got down. He got still. Still again, do you see? He went right back to the one thing they'd trained into his bones: be still, be the still point. Be the thing that tells everyone else that it's going to be all right. Except this time, the stillness might cost him everything. The professionals were shouting now, real shouting, coordinated. One of them was up and moving the crowd with both arms wide. Another was on a radio, and I heard the word, the actual word, for the first time, ricocheting through the crowd from mouth to mouth, getting bigger and uglier every time it was said. Bomb, bomb, there's a bomb, there's a bomb. And the panic that had been bad became something without a bottom. I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you what was in the bag, and how the 11 seconds ended, and what became of the young guard, and why, 3 years later, I stood in a room I never thought I'd stand in and could not get a single word out of my mouth. But that's part 3, and I promise you it's the part worth staying for. There was no explosion. I'll tell you that first, because I made you sit in the fear for 2 whole parts, and it isn't fair to make you sit in it a second longer. Nobody died that day. Not the boy, not the crowd. Not the young guard kneeling in the gravel with his body spread over a bag he thought might be the end of him. But he didn't know that, and for a while neither did I, so let me finish it properly. The bomb squad came faster than I'd have believed possible. I don't know where they'd been, nearby, I suppose. They always are around places like that, though you never see them until you need them. Suddenly there were vehicles at the far gate and men in heavy padded suits moving through the emptying courtyard with that slow, terrible, deliberate walk. And the professionals were forming a line, pushing the last of the crowd back and back, out through the avenue, behind the plane trees. And still the young guard knelt over the bag. They had to make him move. That's the part that gets me. One of the bomb squad men reached him and put a hand on his shoulder, and I saw the guard shake his head. Actually shake his head, as if to say, "No, I've got it, I'm staying." And the man had to say something to him. I was too far to hear. They had me back behind the trees by then. The man had to say something and lean down close, and say it again before the young guard finally, let himself be lifted up and walked away from the bag. He could barely walk. I saw that too. The adrenaline was draining out of him, and his legs were going, and 2 of them had to hold him up, one under each arm, and they walked him back through the courtyard past the pinned man and out toward the vehicles. His head was down. He wasn't looking at anyone. He looked suddenly very young and very tired and about 100 years old all at once. Then they took us all further back, and I couldn't see any more. We waited a long time behind those trees. Nobody talked much. A woman near me was crying quietly, holding her phone against her chest without looking at it. A man was on his knees being sick. Strangers put arms around strangers. That's the thing nobody tells you about after, how everyone just holds on to whoever's nearest. Because in that moment you're not a crowd of strangers anymore, you're the people who were there. And that's a thing that binds you whether you like it or not. Word filtered back in pieces, the way it does. The boy's safe, he's away, he's fine. They've got the man, he's not going anywhere. And then, after a long time, the peace we were all waiting for passed hand to hand through the crowd like something fragile. It's controlled, they've made it safe, it's not going off. I felt my legs go then, same as the guards must have. I sat down on the pavement right there against a tree trunk, and I put my head in my hands, and I don't mind telling you I cried. Not from fear. The fear was over. I cried from the sheer size of the thing that had almost happened and hadn't, from the weight of it lifting all at once. Here's what was in the bag. I only learned all of it later, over the following days and weeks in pieces, the way you learn these things, some from the news, some from the men in suits who came to take my statement. Some from a soldier I got to know afterward who'd explain things to me over the phone late at night when I couldn't sleep. It was real, that's the first thing. It wasn't a scare or a hoax or a bag of nothing. It was a real device, built by a real man who'd spent real months planning to carry it into a crowded royal courtyard on a spring morning when he knew a small boy would be standing at the rope. The heavy, dense weight I'd heard hit the gravel, that was it. That was the thing. It was, they told me, close to being armed. The man's hand had been going into that bag for the last thing it needed when the guard hit him. Seconds, that's what the soldier told me, the one I'd talked to at night. He said it very plainly, no drama in his voice at all, which somehow made it worse. He said, "Your guard bought that courtyard about 10 seconds, maybe 15. And then he was quiet for a while, and then he said, "That's everything." In that situation, 10 seconds is the whole world. The man had planned it around the band. I'd been right about that. He'd counted on the noise and the spectacle. What he hadn't counted on, what nobody could have counted on, what no plan can ever fully account for, was one junior guard whose gut had been quietly ringing like a bell the whole morning, and who trusted it when it mattered. I keep coming back to that. Everyone did everything right that morning. The protection officers were sharp. The palace was secure. The whole vast machine that exists to keep a child like that safe was running exactly as it should. And it still came down, in the end, to one young man deciding to believe the small, cold feeling in his stomach instead of the reasonable voice telling him it was just a coat. We all had that feeling. I had it. I told you I had it. I stood at that railing and my gut told me, and I told my gut, don't be ridiculous. He didn't tell his gut that. That's the only difference between him and me. And that difference was a courtyard full of living people. They kept us for hours giving statements. It was dark by the time I got back to that hotel that smelled of old carpet, and I sat on the edge of the bed and I didn't turn the television on, and I missed my flight and I didn't care. I lay awake all night. I've told you that already. I still don't sleep well in strange places, but that first night I didn't sleep at all, and every time I closed my eyes I saw the same thing, not the man, not the bag, not even the boy. I saw the guard kneeling. I saw the back of that torn red tunic, and his cropped young head, and the way he'd looked back over his shoulder and said, "Get back," so gently, like he had all the time in the world when he had none. I never expected to see him again. I want to tell you about the last part now, the part I said was worth staying for. Because 2 years later, 2 years, almost to the season, another one of those spring mornings that can't decide what it is, I got a letter. A real one on heavy paper, and it invited me to an event. I won't tell you exactly what or where because some of it I promised to keep quiet, and a promise is a promise. But I can tell you this. It was a gathering, small, for the people who'd been there that day and for the man who'd stopped it. They'd found us all, one by one. Everyone who'd given a statement. And they'd brought us together quietly out of the papers to stand in a room and see him honored. He was there, in uniform again, a clean one this time, the tunic spotless, the buttons like little suns. But it was him, older a bit, steadier. There was a small scar through one eyebrow where the cut had been, and I found I couldn't stop looking at it, that little white line, because I'd watched it happen, I'd watched the gravel open it. They read out what he'd done. In the flat official language they use for these things, all dates and facts and no feeling, which is somehow the right way, because the feeling was already in the room, thick as fog. And when they pinned the thing on his chest, this whole room of strangers, the people who'd been there, the ones who understood, we didn't clap right away. There was this long silence first, this held breath, because clapping felt too small. And then someone started and we all did, and it went on far too long and nobody wanted to be the one to stop. Afterward there was tea, the way there always is, and people milling, and I found myself standing near him, closer than I'd been since the courtyard. And I wanted to say something. I'd spent 2 years wanting to say something to this man. I'd rehearsed it. I had whole speeches. I wanted to tell him I was the one at the railing with the cold coffee who saw the man in the coat and did nothing, who felt it and ignored it, and that I'd carried that, and that what he did had, I don't know, it had shown me something about what a person can be when the moment asks. He turned and looked at me, and I opened my mouth. And nothing came out. Not a word. 2 years of rehearsing, and I stood in front of him, and I froze, the exact way little Edmund froze at the rope. The exact way the guard himself had once made a whole courtyard hold its breath. I just stood there with my mouth open and my eyes filling up like a fool. And he understood. Of course he understood. He'd seen it 100 times by then, I imagine, that same struck-dumb look on face after face. He just smiled, a small, tired, kind smile, and he put his hand out and shook mine. And he said the only thing I ever actually heard him say up close. He said, "You were there, weren't you?" Not a question, really. He could see it on me. I managed to nod. And he held my hand a second longer and he said, quieter, "We all got out. That's the thing to remember. We all got out. I saved you. We got out. As if it had been all of us together. As if the crowd and the boy and the coffee-holding fool at the railing had done it alongside him, when the truth is he did it alone, with his own 2 hands and his own body and his own gut. And everyone else in that courtyard, myself very much included, had done nothing but be saved. That's the kind of man he was, is. That's the kind of thing they do, the ones who do it. They pull you under the umbrella with them. They won't stand alone in the credit any more than they'd let you stand alone in the blast. I found out later what became of the little prince, too. Edmund. He was fine. He is fine. Whatever he saw in that half-second before the officer scooped him up and pressed his face into a shoulder, whatever flicker of it reached him, the people around him made sure it didn't take root. He grew up. He's growing up still. Somewhere out there is a boy who will one day be a young man, and then an older one, and he'll live a whole long life full of ordinary mornings, and most of them he'll never know how close he came to never having any of them at all. And I think that's right. I think that's exactly as it should be. I don't think he needs to carry it. That's not a child's weight to carry. That's the guards, and mine, and everyone's who stood behind those plane trees and waited to find out if we were about to watch a young man die. So that's why. When people ask me why I can't stand in crowds anymore, why I get that tightness in my chest when the phones go up and everyone leans one way at once, that's why. It's not fear, not really. Or not only fear. It's that I know now what I didn't know before. I know that in any crowd, on any ordinary morning, the whole thing might come down to one person trusting the small cold feeling in their stomach while everyone else looks at the band. And I know that most of us, most of the time, will tell that feeling to be quiet. I stood there and I told it to be quiet. And I know that once in a while, thank God, there's someone standing very still in a red coat who won't. He's still serving, last I heard, still standing his post. Somewhere, right now, on some gravel courtyard under a gray sky, he's standing perfectly still while tourists pull faces at him and try to make him laugh and think he's just part of the show. And not one of them knows. That's the part I can never get over. Not one of them knows what that stillness is really for. They think it's for the photographs. They think it's tradition, decoration, a bit of old pageantry for the visitors. But I know I was there. I know exactly what that stillness is. It's a man watching the crowd while everyone else watches him. It's someone keeping perfectly still so that when the one wrong thing comes, and one day, somewhere, it always does, he's already ready to move. So the next time you see one of them, standing there like a statue while the world laughs and waves and takes its pictures, do me one small favor. Don't try to make him smile. Just look at his eyes, and notice that they're already quietly watching you.